Hi, everyone. It's Dean Hutchison here, and we're back for another town hall. We have a great panel set again. Only 4 or 5 are going to actually speak on presentations, and then we'll open up for questions on all topics. But just to give you a quick list of what we're going to go through, Nancy Block, the president of SEEDS, is going to speak kind of a SEEDS update and an agency-to-agency assistance stuff or issues. Dr. Danishman will give a medical update. And then we're going to focus on attempts of helping international parents both enter the country and leave. So Bruce Hale, who's had a lot of contact direct with state, is going to talk about, what we can talk about and what we're seeing out there. Mark Galland from Passport and Visa Advisors is going to speak directly to the U.S. passport situation for parents leaving the United States, and then Barry O'Leary from the UK, who's a immigration specialist who's always helped a lot of clients throughout the U.S. get back to the UK, will speak to the kind of fix he's helped with getting parents UK citizenship and travel documents to leave the United States in a quicker fashion. And as always, Allison Wilson can answer any questions from a mental health standpoint. Stephen Snyder and Rich Vaughn are here to speak both from a legal and similar topics that are going on and agency issues. Sarah Page, if any insurance questions come up, and I'm here as well. We do have a hard stop today at 4:45, so we'll get right into this. As I always say, anyone who has to leave, it's recording. We'll send it out on all the different listservs, et cetera, so that you'll all have copies of this moving forward. And for those who have made fun of my presentation skills, you will get a full slide deck this time. So without further ado, I'm going to open up Nancy's microphone. Nancy, can you hear me?
Sure, I can hear you. Thanks, Dean. Hi all, it's Nancy from SEEDS, and collectively the SEEDS board members and I discussed what support mechanisms we want to talk about today and just some of the things that agencies are doing. And I jotted down a few, and they start with the fact that we believe that at SEEDS, agencies are the core of the connections in a donor or surrogacy journey. It's really important to meet regularly with your staff and be as transparent and supportive as you can with everyone you're working with. Our clients and those we coordinate cycles for really need our reassurance now. So we have to be sincere and believable and honest, obviously. It's important to be quick and with our responses and be calm. I think it's appreciated by everyone that we work with, and they've shared those sentiments with us. It's really important to share information on the professional pages. No one is immune to this pandemic, and we all have our strengths and weaknesses. It's important that everyone share your experience, for instance, like with the small business loan process, and tips that might help. Support in the way of at least bi-weekly updates to our clients, to our donors, to our surrogates, and our websites. We should send personalized emails. Just put something in an email that's a little bit more personal so that there's a connection with the client that you're working with or the donor or the surrogate. It's also important to send links to ASRM, CDC, ACOG, WHO, reproductive facts, and we will put those links on the SEEDS website. It's very important. The agencies have been talking quite a bit, but it's really very important to get support from the clinics that we work with. Just to find out what they're doing, what's going on, when they're going to be doing cycles. Are they doing IVF cycles? Are they doing third-party cycles? That would really help us because all of the information that we are all providing isn't known to everybody who works in our system. Inform our clinics on what we do as an agency so that we let them know what we're saying to their patients. Are you hearing from your clinics? Are you hearing from the attorneys that you work with, the escrow agencies, the insurance providers, and most importantly, your mental health professionals, and share that with the people who work with you to support your donors, surrogates, and clients. Join what I call a Zoom therapy meeting. We have several Zoom meetings that we've coordinated through Facebook and just through emails to support each other and not always talk about everything related to work. And I think this is also very important. Create a plan to help clients. Surprise them with something positive like a fee reduction, or let them know that because they are having a delay in their cycle, we're going to pass on a delay and requiring payment to the agency if possible. Also, this is a good time to review agency agreements and extend the terms of your agreement to be longer. I mean, I'm not an attorney, I'm a nurse, but I think most agencies probably have a time limit with their contracts, and in light of the fact that things are being delayed, it's probably a good time to extend those time limits. And maybe create a hold harmless agreement for your agency as cycles begin again, especially if the clinics are initiating them. But most importantly, we need to formulate the agency's plans for when we are able to return to work, as far as short-term, mid-term, and long-term. We don't know the long-term effects on what this will be, so we want to plan for the future. And that's it from Seeds.
Thank you, Nancy. Now I'm going to get Dr. Danishman up. Dr. Danishman, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Sounds good. Well, thank you everyone for allowing me to give you an update in regards to the medical aspects of COVID-19. It's always good to be with you and part of this incredible supportive community. So just wanted to go over 4 points, and this is based on the latest studies on COVID-19. The first 2 studies came out just within the last week and looked at COVID-19 symptoms in pregnant patients. And what they found was that coronavirus and COVID-19 was no more dangerous for pregnant patients than for non-pregnant patients. And pregnant patients were no more likely to have severe symptoms from this particular virus. Now that's important because we had some concerns about patients who are pregnant, and in fact the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has not recommended for patients to stop attempting pregnancy. These 2 studies, one was from the World Health Organization, it was a WHO study, and the second study was conducted by Northwestern University epidemiologist. Now, of course, as always, we need more studies, larger studies, to be able to confirm these particular findings. But at this particular point, it seems like pregnant patients are not more prone to contracting this virus, and if they do, they don't have a higher likelihood of developing severe symptoms. The second point, which is really, really important, and I think that may change the world in a way, is the study that's going to come out within the next 2 weeks by Gilead Sciences. And their study is looking at a particular medication called remdesivir, which helps stop the virus replicating. And if that particular medication is found to be efficacious and effective in treating COVID-19, that really could change how we view the responses to this particular virus. So that particular study is going to come out within the next 2 weeks. We don't have any preliminary update. They've been really hush-hush on the study results, but there are 5 clinical trials right now. We'll get updates on 2 of them. The other issue is that chloroquine has been used for the treatment of COVID-19. Again, ongoing studies. We don't know how effective it is at this particular point. If it is found to be effective, it's safe to use during pregnancy in all trimesters. So that's something that's also potentially good news for patients who are pregnant. The third point is that I've been talking a little bit about in the last week about antibody testing. So COVID-19, obviously testing to determine the number of patients or number of people who've been infected with this virus, that's important. But we are going to miss a significant number of people who have COVID-19 because, based on the latest studies, up to 50% of people who contract this virus may be completely asymptomatic. And so they may not have any symptoms, and yet they may be shedding the virus. One of the reasons why the CDC started recommending using masks for everyone was because they had looked at some studies after a particular sneeze. For example, large respiratory droplets can be found about approximately up to 2 meters from that particular person, but the small respiratory droplets can actually travel up to 6 meters. Sort of almost like a distance of an average room. So that was one of the reasons why, at least to prevent large droplet transmission, they made a decision that everyone should be wearing a mask, simply because 50% of people who may have the virus are completely asymptomatic and they never know. So that's why antibody testing is important, because if we can, by antibody testing, determine who is immune, then that would allow those particular people to potentially at some point re-enter the workforce, schools, and we know that at least for this season, according to the CDC, they're going to be immune and they're not going to be at risk of transmitting the particular virus. The other issue that's really important is that those who are immune have already created antibodies, and we can use their antibodies to help patients who are very sick with COVID-19. 2 recent studies just in the last week came out, and they found a profound improvement in the symptoms of COVID-19, meaning these patients came off ventilators once they were treated with antibodies from the plasma of patients who had already had COVID-19. So diagnosing patients and understanding who has immunity and then potentially using their plasma can also help patients who are very sick on ventilators and potentially help save their lives. And this is, again, 2 studies recently came out and showed that convalescent therapy, they call it, is very, very effective. The last point is vaccines. There used to be a time when vaccine development, from the time of initial clinical phase 1 trials to vaccine being actually available, used to take 12 to 18 months. No longer. All of this has been compressed. Time has been compressed. There are researchers and scientists working day and night. And so we think that we can get actually vaccines through clinical trials within 16 weeks. The latest vaccine treatment is from a group out of University of Pittsburgh, and they're actually developing a Band-Aid type vaccine with microneedles, tiny needles, that actually delivers a protein through the skin that mimics the protein of the virus. And so then that will generate antibodies within the patient in terms of administering immunity for that particular patient with the vaccination. Again, that's a University of Pittsburgh, and they think that they'd be able to potentially get this to large clinical trials within 16 weeks, and then subsequently, then it'll be a distribution issue and a production issue. So some updates in regards to the latest research, and of course, we're always available if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Donishman. All right, so now we'll switch gears to getting IPs here and getting IPs home. So Bruce Hale is going to talk first. Bruce, can you hear me?
Yep, can you hear me? Yep, I think you can. It looks like my microphone's off mute. Thanks for having me here. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to give a quick overview of what I've learned over the past few weeks. I've been working through the State Department in Washington and abroad, Department of Homeland Security, any other related or influential entity in the government that will answer my call, basically, or return an email. You're familiar with the background. We're looking at Exception 2A3 to the presidential proclamations. The one thing that I will point out about the presidential proclamations restricting travel that's come up a couple of times is that it's not based on the citizenship of the IPs, it's based on the physical presence of the IPs. Well, citizenship to the extent that they're not US citizens. It's the physical presence for Europe, the Schengen area, but also the UK, Ireland, China, and Iran. You can go to the next slide, Dean, please. So at the present time, and I have to emphasize the present time being like this hour, the Department of State is considering pre-birth travel by intended parents on a case-by-case basis, completely case-by-case basis. There's no, I underscore, no official policy. My understanding in talking to people at State is that there are multiple levels of the bureaucracy that are involved in the process of looking at these travel exceptions. The initial guidance from the state was that the child needed to be born before travel would be authorized. So you had to have physical existence of the child US citizen, and that a birth certificate would be required as proof of birth. It is possible that birth must still occur in situations where parents is adjudicated post-birth, but that should not stop you from trying. However, the requirement for the birth certificate has been relaxed with the recognition by state that civil records processes are disrupted in the United States, but they haven't given us an official list of what would be acceptable as a substitute to a birth certificate. So my advice would be to use whatever you have available to you, medical records, for example, or even the birth certificate worksheet. If there's a voluntary acknowledgement of parentage available to you, I would give that a try as well. So you can go to the next slide, Dean. So today, my understanding of the current process that is forming, and this has evolved over the past couple of weeks, but it seems that the work begins in the US Embassy that is local to the intended parents, wherever they are. The embassy, the US Embassy, really initiates the process and must advocate for the travel authorization. Now, here we have to recognize that each embassy operates completely differently. So if IPs are in a country where the embassy is not helpful, there may be additional work to do to convince them to help. Each embassy will have its own processes and its own level of questions and its own documentations that it will want to have in place before what they do is they send a request back to Washington in the form of a memo or a brief, and then Washington is where the ultimate decision is made. So let me wrap up with a few key points on the next slide. What is the important thing for convincing state to allow these travel authorizations is the national interest argument that we have to make. This is a term of art that gets the attention of state. Specifically, state is sensitive to the argument that the medical resources of the hospital where the child will be born will be diverted from COVID care to newborn care if the intended parents are not there. So you want to get a statement from the hospital saying as such that they are concerned about not having the intended parents there to take care of the child at birth. If the hospital is overwhelmed and is not able to give a statement, perhaps a local attorney in the area can draft a brief. That was a suggestion to me as a local attorney from state that I might be able to substitute a brief that I wrote for a hospital if need be. New guidance that I've received from state within the past 2 days is that there are internal discussions in Washington over the question of whether or not only one or both intended parents should be permitted to travel. So my advice here, based on what's been shared with me, is that if you are working with intended parents trying to get them over here, prepare strong arguments for having both of them travel. But also simultaneously prepare them, the intended parents, to choose which one would travel if only one is given the authorization. That's a very high-level overview of what I've seen. I'll turn it back to Dean, and happy to answer questions later.
All right, I'm going to start with Mark Galland. Mark, as I said, is with U.S. Passport and Advisors. He's going to speak from the U.S. side of helping or seeing what the current status is of getting expedited or any type of passport to get our international parents home. So, Mark, can you hear me?
I can, Dean. Thank you.
You got it.
Hey, everyone. Mark Gillen from Passport Visa Advisors. We are specialized in passport processing expeditiously for international IPs coming to the United States to have babies. Obviously, our business has been affected quite significantly by the suspension of the application expediting process that happened back in March. So we're all kind of working on the new world here, trying to figure this out. Basically, all expediting processes have been taken off the table for passports, for U.S. passports for babies here in the USA. The only exceptions that they have has been the life or death terminology, as well as standard passport application processing. We have been advising our international IPs that there's about 5 options they really have. I'll go through them quickly. One is the emergency, which is the life or death, which currently is defined by the State Department as being a death, a serious injury, a serious medical condition of immediate family. And that would require a death certificate, a morgue certificate, a letter from a physician or a medical practitioner indicating why a emergency life or death passport are required. I'll go into that just a bit more. The other option they have is to apply for standard processing, which is a 6 to 8 week process. We were told earlier today that this 6 to 8 weeks has probably been extended to maybe 8 to 12 instead. So if you have an IP that is here in the United States and decides they just want to do something and they apply for the passport now, they need to be expecting to stay in the United States probably through June, if not into early July. That process really can't be rectified or changed halfway through the process because it's more like a card laid is a card played, if you would. So there is a certain point of time where if everything goes back to normal, we could stop it and cancel everything and then try to expedite, but we don't. There'll be a certain period of time where it's going to be after the fact. The other option they have is applying for a foreign passport. This is a passport of the parents, the international parents, where they come from, and apply for at the consulate in the United States or the embassy in the United States. We've had only of that example, only France has been generous to their citizens and to issue a French passport. I've had it happen 2 or 3 different occasions, whereas countries such as the UK, Germany, and Italy have not been very helpful in getting the newborns a passport for their country so they can go back on that passport. The 4th option would be to wait. We obviously would expect this to last at least through the end of March or April and probably into May as well. When they go back to normal is completely unknown to us at this point in time. And obviously all of us are standing by for that to happen, and what that looks like after they go back to normal is to be determined. We don't know what that normalcy is going to be. I don't doubt that there's a time that we will be able to start expediting passports in a day like we have in the past, but I don't know when that's going to be. The last option they have is available is the option of the standard processing, and then also applying for a foreign passport. We have a current couple right now that is applying for a passport with the normal processing time, but they also have a French passport they're going to apply for as well. I told them to make sure you get your French passport before you apply, because they may not be able to travel to France if they don't have the French passport for their child. In that case, what they would do is they would list their either their attorney or their surrogate or organization as the address in the United States where they are, so that they can leave to go back to France and then be able then to have the passport delivered to that address long after they're back in country, and then that the lawyer or whomever it might be can send the passport physically to them in France or whatever country it might be. Right now, as of this morning, there are 5 passport agencies that have been shut down to any type of walk-in traffic, and that's going to be New York, Atlanta, New Orleans, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and Connecticut are the ones that are shut down right now. So if you have someone that is in Georgia and they want to try to apply in person, they would not be able to do so. They would have to go to Miami or to Houston, for example, instead. The option to the emergency passport application process has been successful in the past. I am hearing back from others that today that they said that they have tried using the doctor's excuse, and the NPIC, the National Passport Information Center, has basically shut them down completely. So that is completely unknown whether or not that's going to be an option available for our clients in the future or not. Quickly to wrap up, a couple of quick things for people that are here with ESTAs, with the visa waiver that they have from the Schengen countries, the European countries. There is a thing called satisfactory departure, which is now being offered by the USCIS, I'm sorry, by CBP, that is allowing them to be able to stay in the country for 30 days after their visa or their ESTA expires, but it must be applied for prior to the expiration of that ESTA to begin with. The only thing I can say also just in closing would be is that with the length of the lead time going from 6 to 8 weeks to 8 to 12 weeks, and the State Department mentioning that there is significant delays in considering waiting until they return to normal, it might be a very good idea for your IPs to sit tight if they don't have the option of applying in person, or they can't get a foreign passport, and then let us or organizations like ours help them with passports quickly once the things return to normal. I believe that's all I have right now. Thank you all very much. If I can answer any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Mark. All right, so Barry, I think you're live. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dean. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, so Barry's going to speak about some options for UK parents. Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Okay, thank you very much for asking me to speak, Dean. The problems we have with UK parents at the moment are basically what really useful for me that Bruce and Mark have talked about. We have the issue with the potential issues of entry to the US for the intended parents. And then also we have the issue of not being able to obtain a US passport as easily as before. As you'll probably all know, for UK parents who have their children born in the United States, they're usually in a very fortunate position because they have organisations like Mark that can get them a passport quickly, and they come home and we sort out the nationality issues while they're here in the UK at home. However, with that not being available, it means that we have to deal with British citizenship issues there in the US and bring them home on a British document. Now, for a lot of parents, the problems, the complexity of British nationality law is causing a big problem. The problem is first of all that if you have a married surrogate in the United States, those kids aren't born British, and so we first of all have to make the child British and then apply for a British passport. If the surrogate mother's unmarried, then we only have to do the second step. But the British passport authorities generally have been very slow and very poor at getting things dealt with quickly. So we've been here in the UK trying to deal with the issue of basically parents being very stressed and concerned about when they're going to be able to get home after the baby's birth. Now, we've approached the government about this, and I can't take all the credit. There was another lawyer with me, Natalie Gamble, who was doing it. And we have actually got them to engage. Now, it's still on quite a case-by-case basis, but they are being very helpful. And essentially what they've done is, in terms of actually saying children, making the children British citizens, they've actually really condensed the process. They've given us one caseworker, so instead of it taking, like, say, 1 to 2 months, that we're actually getting, that they've said they'll try and do it in a matter of days, and we can get the documents directly to the caseworker. And they've also, really importantly, one part of the process was actually to enroll biometric data. And to do that, we actually use the offices of the US Homeland Security. There's an agreement with them, with the British government. But of course, they're all closed. And they have said now, and they've said that in the past few days, they will waive the requirement to enroll any biometric data. So they are actually now dealing with these applications quite quickly. And then luckily, the Home Office that is dealing with it is then looping in the Passport Office and the Embassy and explaining to them the child is now British, there's no question over nationality, and therefore they're given the kind of comfort to go ahead and issue a document. Because that's what they're often worried about. They're often worried about, is this child British? And in those circumstances then, the people in the Home Office are actually getting the other departments to issue a document quickly, be it a full passport or it be what we call an emergency travel document. For the children that are born British, for us it seems quite strange. We're also going through the Home Office, which is a body that really shouldn't really be dealing with this. It's not their area. But because they're experts on nationality law, they've agreed to help us with it. And they are actually now still being the kind of the way into the Passport Office and the embassies to actually get the emergency documents. So where we are is it's all actually looking quite good, though it's still very much on a case-by-case basis, and the information isn't really getting out there. And so what we really have to do is link the parents with the really helpful caseworker in the British Home Office. And it really is one person who's doing this, which makes it quite scary. I hope she stays healthy. And in that way, we should be able to get British documents to get the children home. And we would hope within a matter of weeks, maybe up to a month, but not as extended as it would be maybe listening to Mark having to wait for the standard service on the passport. But, you know, parents are, I mean, you've probably all seen this yourself, parents are really quite stressed. And obviously the issue of getting into the United States is going to become more and more of an issue, I think, as time goes on. It was really helpful what Bruce said. The one thing I would add from the British parents' point of view, luckily, the people I've been dealing with so far actually it's their second surrogacy journey. So they've actually already had a US child, and that has seemed to have helped them, actually, because they were entering with their US child. But that's something that really we on the UK side are looking to people like Bruce for help with. That's all I've really got to say. If anybody's got any questions, that's great.
Thanks. So
okay.
I'm gonna thank the panel again, and we have 45 minutes for questions. So I'm gonna open up everyone's mics. You can self-mute yourself if you want, and then I'll start reading through questions. If you haven't asked a question and you want to ask a question, there is a box in the control panel on your right that you can just start queuing up questions, and I'll get to them as I can.
So Dean,
question will, yep.
So I was going to ask you a question. I thought her presentation was great. I just was reached out to as an agency by a clinic today, talking about doing a town hall specifically for the agency's intended parents. Nancy, do you think that's a good idea?
I think depending on what the information that's shared is a good idea. I would say yes and no. I don't know enough to say yes or no.
Well, do you think agencies could solicit trusted attorneys? And I guess this, clinic could also offer the doctor to be on it. So maybe the agency arranges it for the parents and then just puts the professionals in charge rather than giving advice themselves, but at least they collect their intended parents and reassure them all at once.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on that, Steve, as well. I mean, we've been trying to do it every other week with different doctors, different lawyers, different professionals. Just, you know, much like these, there's no real answers, but at least to let them know any updates that are happening, you know, potential ways to get around these things. Just, I think, you know, whether the information is ironclad or not, the clients have been very receptive, and the intended parents to say, you know, we feel more reassured. We're happy you're working on these things and keeping us informed. Please keep them going. So I think, you know, as you would probably be willing to, and many attorneys out there would be happy to join a panel just to give the broad advice, and I'm sure a lot of clinic doctors would be happy to jump on as well, just to give some updates to parents. Let's see. So first question, people ask if I'll email out the PowerPoint and the slides. Yes, when I send the link to the presentation, I'll also send the PowerPoint with it. And I don't know if anyone has an answer, and we can jump in. Anyone have luck or any issues with China at the moment for foreign passport applications? Any luck to either get them in or get them out on the same travel bans that are happening?
Rich, I would think that the West Coast would be the most likely venue for that. Do you have any of those pending?
Well, the reason I didn't answer is I haven't had any with issues or births in the last short period of time, so I haven't had an opportunity to cross that hurdle yet.
Yeah, and I'm in the same position, although I do have a Chinese set of parents coming up in May or early June, so I'm hoping things resolve by then, but we'll be crossing that bridge in the future. But I don't have any information right now.
Yeah, I can say the most current one I have that came in, they actually did a 2-week stay in Cambodia on their way to the United States. So they were able to self-quarantine, and they got to the United States and with no issues I believe on Sunday or Monday, and then traveled on to the state of delivery. So there are still a couple countries that would accept travel from China that was also accepting travel, US was accepting travel from. In terms of getting Chinese travel documents to leave from Chinese consulates, I don't have any information on that. If anyone in the crowd listening has had experience with the Chinese consulate process to get home, throw it in the question box, and I'm happy to send it out. Let's see, this would be, I guess, for Bruce and maybe even Barry, but have we seen any different treatment for same-sex IPs from the U.S. State Department versus heterosexual couples in terms of getting documents to come here and potentially to leave?
I have not, this is Bruce, I have not seen differential treatment for the purpose of getting them here. Most of the people, and maybe it's a self-selecting crowd that will talk to me, but most people have been very sympathetic to the intended parent situation and have been looking for ways to help. But they're dealing with a major bureaucracy that hasn't sorted out the process.
And I think I can, just from anecdotal evidence, I know, we had one set of hetero parents get a visa to come early, and I know of one set of French parents that were same sex that were able to get the special visa, the ones that were in the news article not too long ago. So at least in those two pieces of evidence, there was no differential treatment that I know of.
Dean, can I?
There's a question. Yep.
So, this is Rich. So it's not so much a differential treatment aspect, but to speak a little bit to what Barry was talking about earlier, if you are dealing with a client who's trying to get home country citizenship for that child so that child can get a travel document to go back, I have a situation right now where it's a single intended mother, donor egg, donor sperm, surrogate, so she has no bio connection. So under UK law, she's not going to be able to transmit citizenship to that child to get that child to be British until they go through an adoption. So we're working on that. So just keep that in mind.
Can you hear me actually, Dean? It's Barry.
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Which we don't need an adoption for that. I know it's very little known, but I've actually on a number of occasions gone directly to British citizenship for single mother with no connection. It is actually possible under the Home Office's policies. And I know that people often think that you can't, but I've done it quite a few times, and they don't have an issue with that. So in that situation, we can actually go direct to registration as a British citizen under the Home Office's policies, even without a bio connection.
Great. Thanks, Barry.
Dean, can I tag on to the question to Bruce? So Bruce, you mentioned that it may be just one parent under the State Department's ongoing discussions. And my question is, will they tend to favor the genetic parent, if there is one, over the non-genetic parent if the second parent is? Is that how we should be counseling our sets of parents where one is genetic, one is not?
Okay, so there's a couple of ways to answer that question, and I'm going to cut it short and say no. What I've been hearing from state, what's been posed back to me directly is, if we only allow one of these parents to come, which one is it? You tell us. So that's the communication that I've been getting from state. They're much less, they seem to be much less concerned by the question of the gender and the biological connection, as they are just looking for an excuse, looking for a way to minimize the risk of bringing in the coronavirus by limiting the number of people. So if their thinking is, if you've got two parents, one's good enough to bring in. They're not wrapped up in the question of biology. Now, having said that, taking a step back, you do need to look at the way your parentage is set up. So if you do have a situation where only one of the intended parents is going to be the parent, the legal parent of the child initially, you might want to favor that person, simply for the ease of getting medical attention here in the United States and also getting out of the country eventually. So I would look at it from that perspective. To date, state has not made any showing of interest in that.
All right, and just one more tag onto that. Is there a significant difference in their perspective between pre-birth and post-birth states where the legal parentage is established beforehand as opposed to after they arrive?
So I have been working on this from a pre-birth perspective, specifically, and we can get into the nuances. I don't think we have the time to. I don't want to get into the nuances of how the language of the pre-birth order is in terms of exactly when the parents are considered the legal parents. I've been pushing it from a pre-birth standpoint. I would think, however, that if you've got a situation where you've got post-birth adjudication of parentage, I would not shy away from trying. Because in a post-birth adjudication of parentage, you will still have probably some documentation of intent of the parents to be the legal parents and intent of the surrogate to not parent. And you will also be able, I hope, to get a statement from the hospital or a local attorney talking about the importance of having the child's parents there initially, to relieve the burden on the medical resources, but also for a whole host of other things that you can throw in there as well. So I would give it a try, nonetheless.
Yeah, I can jump in there, Bruce, in that the one case I had that has been given a special visa thus far, they have a pre-birth order pending, but it hasn't been approved yet. So when they had their meeting with the U.S. consulate in Switzerland, they were granted the visa despite not having an actual court order in place yet. They had the contract with them, they had some of the pleadings, but they did not have an actual order at the time the visa was granted. So it has worked with an explanation from local counsel as well as us in our letter to say, you know, they entered into the agreement, this is the plan, the court order is pending. It may not happen pre-birth depending if the courts are open and active, but they are the parents, and they found an empathetic consulate worker. I think the whole theme today has been it's a case by case basis, and it's not a country by country basis. It's not a consulate by consulate basis. It's sometimes a consulate worker by consulate worker basis, and who you get. So I think tell your intended parents to continue to push all these different levels, because they may find someone who is more receptive in the U.S. Even to get out of here for a passport, they may find a more receptive person, at a different location or at a different time than when they're calling the first time. So there's a medical question on if there's been any updates from ASRM since the initial ASRM guidelines. I don't know if Dr. Danishman is there and can hear me.
I can hear you. No further updates. Sort of their view has remained the same, and the next update is supposed to be on April 13th.
And at that same time, there was a question directed to you. Do you know when the University of Pittsburgh vaccine is going into trials or is already into trials?
The clinical trials, the large clinical trials, should be completed within 16 weeks. Then it's a matter of whether how quickly the medication or really the band-aids could be distributed on a large scale.
There's a question for Mark. Mark, can you repeat how visitors can get the extension on their visa, and is it different than an I-539? And is it only available to citizens of certain countries, that extension?
The extension is available for the ESTA client or countries, pardon me, which there are about 39 of them right now. If there's a visa, like a B1, B2 visa that they have to come to the United States, that's not applicable for that reasoning. The extension for the satisfactory departure would be done through the CDP, CDP website versus the USCIS, which is currently closed. It would temporarily be I can't talk today all of a sudden, which would be the organization that would typically put that extension in place.
Can I add something, Mark?
I know.
Absolutely.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is Rich. I've been doing some research with some immigration attorney friends on this as well. If you have a visa waiver or ESTA, you're not under USCIS jurisdiction. You're under the jurisdiction of Custom and Border Patrol protection.
Correct.
And if you are applying for a satisfactory departure, you have to go to the port of entry where you came in to the U.S. to apply for that satisfactory departure. And each port of entry is allowed to set up its own procedures and policies for how and when they will grant it. So you have to know, what the policy is of the port of entry where you came in. If you have a regular visa, like you said, a B1, B2, then you're under the jurisdiction of USCIS. They are still apparently entertaining emergency procedure requests for extensions. A lot of the same policies and procedures that would apply to satisfactory departure, grants of satisfactory departure would apply here as well. 30 days seems to be the current information. I was poking around the website, the CBP website, the ESTA website, the USCIS website yesterday with an immigration attorney, and he very, aptly pointed out that all of the policies that they're putting on their websites now about these issues are still being developed, and some of the information on the website is inconsistent and just not correct. So you'll have to refer to the website, but then call the port of entry and then find out what their current policies are.
Excellent. Also on the ESTAs are typically granted for a 2-year period of time. And the time in country is limited to 90 days. So they have actually stopped issuing ESTA visa authorization because of to cull the amount of travel to the United States. In some cases, they're also canceling the ESTA visas that are currently in place. So if you have a parent who is in the United States and finds out that their visa or their ESTA has been canceled, that doesn't mean they're in violation of staying in the United States. They were legal when they came into the country, and they remain legal until they depart. And they would have to then reapply when times return to normal for an ESTA another time. It only costs $14 to apply, and it cannot be applied for while in the United States. So if you have clients, one of the things that I have found with the emergency life or death that has worked has been not only the letter from the doctor that says that the exposure to the coronavirus is very harmful to the newborn with a low immunization system, but also a couple other things to point out that the physician had pointed out is that insurance in the United States is not covered for the child, I believe, after, you guys can help me with this, but after they leave the hospital. And that's one thing. And also is that the parents could be in violation of their ESTA status if they were forced to stay in the United States until the passport was approved. So not only the medical points, but the financial burden, as well as the as the visa, or in this case, the ESTA violation, were all what was done successfully in the last couple of weeks to be able to get a passport to get back to Australia. Whether or not that's applicable now, after Steve, didn't you mention that you've heard that they've not allowing for anything other than life or death at this point going forward?
That is correct. It seems that in the last 24 hours, the National Call-In Center has narrowed its portal again to that.
That's been my experience from talking to our clients earlier today who had, as I said, called into the NPIC only to be told that what they're offering as a doctor's excuse was not considered to be life or death.
Correct.
Which is very unfortunate.
I will add that having talked with the immigration attorney, although it's not a guarantee, he was saying it's highly unlikely anyone would be denied a satisfactory departure if they're delayed because their child couldn't get a passport. They're not going to expect the parent to leave without their child. Again, not a guarantee, but likely that those satisfactory departures will be granted on that basis if they're still here and the child can't get a passport or some other travel document to get home.
Yeah.
Let me add one more thing in regards to which we didn't touch on from a passport perspective, is that we have had parents, IPs, been unable to come to the United States for whatever reason, and have been able to assign their power of attorney to an individual in the United States, along with the necessary DS-3053 form, and apply for a passport successfully for that child when both parents or a parent is out of the country and not in the United States. I'm talking about in normal times. So if a parent, when we get to the point where we're back to normal, and if parents can't get here for whatever reason, there are methodologies that are in place, there's procedures that are in place that is acceptable by the U.S. State Department that allows that a parent that is not, or a representative of the parent or parents, to get to apply for a passport for their child, for that child.
I have a question, and I think it was planted to make me mispronounce laissez-passer one more time for the 100th time in the last 4 weeks. But what countries other than France are honoring laissez-passers? So I think it's been somewhat discussed here, but France is allowing for travel home on French travel documents. We've heard from Barry that the UK is speeding up the process. I know I don't know if anyone on the panel has had any other luck in any other countries that have allowed for their own countries' travel documents to be used, but I know there's pushes around in these countries. I know there's a group in Sweden pushing their government to allow expedited travel documents, but I haven't heard anything yet. But I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in if they've seen any success outside of those two countries.
Yeah, I can speak to that. It looks like Italy can issue an emergency travel document. It's sort of like an EU harmonized laissez-passer. In Italy, though, it's called lasciapassare, by the way. Sorry, I'm showing off. But I would be careful, especially with Italy, as one example, asking the home country to issue this kind of document when surrogacy is highly illegal could create some more problems. So, work with local counsel in Italy. This information came to me from Ida Parisi in Italy, and that would apply in other countries like Hong Kong, for instance, where it's highly illegal. So just be careful.
Yeah. And I know Germany was issuing them earlier. I've heard that a lot of their consulates or embassies have shut down here, or they're harder to get in touch with. But I know we had parents that were successful in getting German passports to get home early on in this process, but I think they've become harder to get. Are there any connections that can be harnessed to try and find officials who can help outside of the action letters that were written? So as many of you may know, or if you don't know, there was an action letter that we assisted with, that Quad A helped with, that Men Having Babies, GLAD joined in, resolved. So there's an awesome group of organizations to send to specific targets in the Congress. But in your home states, if you think you have a congressman or a senator that may be helpful in this area, or may have helped in the fertility world prior, it doesn't hurt to send a personalized version of that action letter to them directly, and particularly if you have international parents in your home state that are stuck getting passports, it doesn't hurt, same thing, to send a letter maybe urging that congressional staff to assist. It may not help in any way, but most likely won't hurt in any way either. So I think, anything available, try and latch on. I know Bruce, I know Rich, I know probably Steve and everyone on this call, Nancy, et cetera, has probably tried to attempt to do this, and whether there's been success or not, we'll never know, but it might be that they are talking about it behind the scenes and pushing it at certain levels. Let's see, have we seen any movement at hospitals away from having the GC be alone to having her own support person with her and having the baby have a support person? Has anyone had luck getting both IPs into the hospital to stay with the baby after delivery in the hospital, and can they share strategies? I can speak. I haven't seen anything different. It's been different hospital to hospital and staff to staff. It seems like a lot of them are at least letting the surrogate have a support person now. I haven't seen one yet, other than early on where she was not allowed to have a support person. But the parents, definitely it's harder to get both, if not one. But I don't know, obviously Rich, Steve, Bruce, you've probably all had these issues come up already, as well as other people here on the call.
Yeah, I've seen a variety of responses. It's just hospital by hospital.
Yeah, and the only birth I've had since the last call, the hospital was still restricting, so there wasn't any movement. We have started in our law office drafting hospital packets for delivery to the social workers and the staff weeks before the birth, to open negotiations and try to soften them up, kind of like putting the ship's batteries on the shoreline before the Marines land. So I don't know how effective those are yet, but I will keep everybody posted.
So there's a question. ASRM has been clear on recommendations. Some clinics are continuing to conduct cycles on donors. Is there clinical evidence to justify cycles? If it is safe, why are parties being asked to sign waivers to continue treatment?
I can answer that question. So there's no evidence for the COVID-19 virus being transmitted via sperm, eggs, or embryos. The reason some clinics are using those particular waivers is because of if the situation in a particular clinic or in a particular location where the clinic is located changes, then that would lead to cycle cancellation, which could have then financial ramifications for patients. So I believe those particular COVID waivers are to inform patients that the situation is changing day by day, hour to hour. But the fact that if you start an IVF cycle at this particular point, there's a chance that it could get canceled. There's a chance that there could be a mandatory shutdown of all businesses. So those waivers address those particular concerns.
If parents are allowed into the U.S. based on an exemption or exclusion, do they get a more limited visa, or do they get a full 90 days? Or is it actually a greater length visa that they get if they get a special visa? Does anyone know that answer?
I can speak to that. If they get a special visa, I mean, this is what I've heard. They're getting a visa type R, which is a non-immigrant visa with a class B1, B2 visitor visa, and it will have an annotation on it that says, quote, exception under PP for presidential proclamation on novel coronavirus. So I think that's a 90-day visa, Mark.
Correct.
Can it be confirmed that it was a French passport, or it was a laissez-passer that's been used for French parents? I was under the impression, or at least my intended parents that have gotten them have just gotten the I have to say it again, the laissez-passer.
Passé.
I don't know if they've gotten French passports, but if anyone else wants to jump in on that.
The client advised me that they did get a French passport, but I didn't ask them to clarify. So I could be wrong in sharing that information.
I want to speak to Germany for just a moment. I have not had German clients stuck here. I had some clients that were almost not able to get out, but got back to Germany. But prior to all of this, I have had some clients from Germany actually go to the German consulate while they're here, getting their normal birth certificate and US passport, and also getting their German passport from the German consulate. It's not a guarantee that it's going to work in every case, but I mean, I would imagine if that happened pre-corona, that might be something that the German consulates would be willing to do.
The next question is, if someone applies for a special exemption visa based on the birth upcoming and they are denied, does that impact their ability to get, just travel on another visa after birth based on the birth of the child? Was there any negative connotation put on their name for applying and being rejected?
This is Bruce. I don't know of that happening, but what I would fall back to is the initial State Department position that the child needed to be born for the exemption to be granted. So if they're denied prior to the birth and then the child is born, and they could, my expectation is that they would still be able to reapply and get the exemption at that point.
And this is Rich. I don't have any information on that either, but I would say it might also depend on why they were denied. There have been some clients who go to apply for some visa or ESTA only to find out that they've previously overstayed and didn't know it, so they have a red mark on their record, and that's one of the reasons that they could be denied.
Yeah, that will take the process, basically.
Yeah.
Anyone on the panel or in the crowd, and we might not have enough time to get to it, but have any updates on anyone traveling back to Spain? I have not had any, but I don't know if anyone else on the panel has.
Not here.
No.
No for me.
No, but I have a couple coming up, so I will be mining that territory shortly.
Okay. Just a comment from the crowd that it looks like Israel, with some added documentation more than normal, is allowing parents to return home on Israeli travel documents, so they don't have to wait for US passports. Anyone in this panel or in the crowd have clients with children in the NICU who are not allowed in the hospital? And if so, what are the hospitals doing, allowing those parents to be with the babies or to have certain rights?
This is Rich. I had a hospital in Vegas not allow both parents, but they would allow one parent in for a period of 24 hours and then they could switch. It wasn't a NICU situation, and it turns out the baby was discharged within about 24 hours anyway. So that was the one situation where they've been not allowed entry. There's one in Wisconsin also not allowed entry. But they just, have been talking to them over the phone about any medical decisions that need to be made.
So there's a comment that someone who had a pre-birth order was allowed in the hospital via the governor of Maine, that they were allowed to be at the hospital because of that court order and establishing their parentage immediately upon birth. The birth was happening today, so there will be an update to make sure it did happen. Another question is the State Department allowing parents to enter U.S. before the birth now under the parents of a U.S. citizen? So this is that case-by-case basis. There is evidence that they have on certain cases. There's evidence that they're requiring the birth to happen. As kind of Bruce went through, it's depending on the consulate you go to and the staff potentially that you're talking with. as Bruce mentioned, there's ample evidence that they are now all talking together, and they seem to be sending very similar responses now. Each consulate kind of having a almost canned response and canned request. So it seems like state in the, as Bruce mentioned, at the DC level is fully immersed in this and understand what's going on. It would be nicer if they had a blanket allowance versus a blanket review. But there is evidence of some people being allowed in advance of birth for the various reasons. I think that's, wow, we finished in, I think that's the last question. So,
I have a comment I want to.
Again, thank you. Oh yeah, yes, any comments? We got 8 minutes, so any comments you want to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to share something else that came to my attention this week. In prior webinars, we've mentioned that, if you're sort of in a last resort situation, the parents can't get here and they don't have a temporary guardian or someone they can appoint with as a power of attorney for healthcare, that perhaps they consider reaching out to Safe Families for Children or local adoption agencies that might have cradle care homes. The Safe Families for Children option may or may not work now. We had a client calling to sort of their branch office in Northern California, and we were told that they're no longer hosting any additional families at this time because of Corona. So it may not work. And that was a comment made by Julia Tate in Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, and at least in Northern California, it may not be an option. So double check on that before you rely on that as a last resort.
Yeah. I can say too, Rich, on that, is we reached out to them as an agency, and we kind of took a step back from them because they do help out a lot of people in like battered home areas and really bad living spaces. So even if they had availability, it was a little tough of an ask for them to, maybe as a full last resort in these cases, but they do, if you may be taking a space from a child who really, is in a bad space and needs to be out of their home itself. So that may be one of the reasons they're shutting down partially as well, because they were losing spaces in homes for children like that. There is a question about anyone having luck getting parents back to Australia. I know there's been some emails circulating, I believe, on the professionals pages as well, but I think there's a Roman Duenna, which Rich and Steve, you may have his contact or the name of his company. I know he's been successful in getting parents citizenship immediately and potentially getting travel documents home. And I know there's a group assisting in this process that we can potentially circulate if they let us. But there has been anecdotal evidence of success getting people back to Australia.
Yeah. And Sam Everingham of Families Through Surrogacy is circulating pretty clear guidelines on what needs to be done. But I haven't tested that out yet, but I expect it to be very fruitful, I'm hoping.
And I had a chat with Roman. It's Roman Diuna, and his company's called Far and Wide Migration. And he did want me to reemphasize on this call that it is still case by case. It's by no means a guarantee that other children born to Australian parents will be able to get Australian citizenship for flying back. But it did work in a few cases, so he's hopeful, but he just wants, again, to reemphasize it's not a guarantee.
This is Mark. A quick question to the panel. We did have an Australian couple who was able to get their passport for themselves in the United States, but then were advised by the Australians that they could not apply for the ETA, which was due typically for the US-born child because of travel restrictions going back to Australia. And at that point, they had to apply for a Australian visa from the consulate in Houston. And has anyone else had any experience with that as being a requirement?
I haven't had the experience, but I think that's the basis of Roman trying to get involved in this.
Gotcha.
And Sam Everingham's group trying to help is to try and potentially find a workaround to that may be quicker. But yeah, I know Australia, because Australia also has the particular issue that when you land in Australia, you're mandated quarantine in a hotel at the port of entry in Australia for 2 weeks. So
Exactly.
parents coming home from from the United States with their babies will have to be aware that they're going to be in a hotel room near the airport where they fly into for 2 weeks before they can return to their homes as well.
Wow.
And another question came in. Any suggestion on how to demonstrate to the U.S. consulate that IPs will be able to respect the 14-day self-quarantine once entering the U.S.? Bruce, I don't know in your case if they asked for any specifics other than what their plan was and where they were staying.
Yeah, so I've heard a couple of different things, and one is, I've just been asked, what's their plan, and I've said they're going to rent lodging and self-quarantine, and they've been self-quarantined for, weeks now. Anyhow, but then I've also seen evidence that other consulates are asking for more specific proof, like the exact address and the reservations and things like that. So again, it demonstrates that there is multiple ways that state is answering these questions.
This is going to be called the case-by-case town hall for now.
I'm not laughing because it's true.
Yeah.
All right, I think that was the last question. Obviously, questions that come in between town halls, we have the ABA listserv, we have the surrogacy professionals. There's and many of you from Quad A on here. There's many of you from other organizations. Get them circulated. We all are part of most or mutual those places. So any questions we missed that can be answered in advance, any topics you want on our upcoming town halls, or any potential speakers you think would be great that have helped in certain ways, send them to us. We're happy to add new and different topics each week or every other week. But thank you again to the panel. Thank you for everyone who's been on. Barry, thank you for being via phone from the UK and talking about the UK process.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
Bruce, Mark, Anthony, Rich.
Thank you, Dean.
So have a great day, everyone, and I'll get this out once it's uploaded to the system and send out links to everyone so they can pass it on to other people in the field.
All right. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dean.
Thank you.
Everybody.